Welcome back, GRD121, to part 2 of our EX11 wine bottle that we're working on in Figma, that I'm working on in Figma, that you'll be working on in Figma. And where I got so far was the main bottle shape and the gradients and this little glow thing in the middle, this second shape we did here. Now we're going to make the foil as a separate shape that could go over top of it, and also these highlights are going to be separate shapes. The one over here, which is very subtle, and this one here, which is a little brighter, which gives it that shine, that specular highlight, and the one here, which is a little more duller. And we have a little indentation of the bottle here that we could do. I don't even remember doing that last time, but I'll go and do this. And what I could do is probably just trace this, just go over top of it, just take the pen tool and just go here and maybe go up here, maybe click and drag here, and just click there. I'll go down here and do a click and drag and click on the point, and over here do a little click and drag a little bit to round it off. Click on the point, and I'll click and drag a little bit here to make it come down now, and I'll click on the point when I'm done, and I'll hit escape. Now, this doesn't matter that much down here, so I'm just going to select the shape and hit done and move it over here and give it a fill. Now, I'll give it a dark fill. This gradient isn't that dark, and I think when I did it last time, I think I made the bottle shape very dark and then kind of brought it in. So I may have to change this gradient a little bit so it's a little darker on the end, but I'll bring this thing over and I'll just kind of put it here. And I'll fill it. Let's see where it is. It's on top of the bottle, the main bottle, so that's okay. And I'll give it a fill, and I'll see what it looks like black. It might be too dark, and I might have to blur it a little bit too. That might be too dark. I might use this kind of greenish color and then go into the dark a little bit, something like that. Looks good for now, and I don't need a stroke. I'll hit the minus sign for the stroke. And I might try the blur thing. That's been working pretty good. So I'll hit plus for the effects, and I'll go to the drop down and choose layer blur, and let's see what it's at right now. It's at 4. That might be okay. I don't know if I have to go much more than that. I don't want to blur it a whole lot, just a little bit. Actually, 4 looks okay. So that looks okay. And I can mess with the anchor points a little bit, or I could try to darken up this gradient. When I go into this gradient, this ending here might be a little darker. I might want to go a little bit darker. Let me click on here and go a little darker for that gradient. That might look a little better. Let me zoom out. And actually, what I might want to do is click here and then make this one darker. And then move this over a little bit. Well, we'll see how that goes. I don't know if I like that as much. It's bringing in that kind of oval shape, but that's good for now. Like I said, I don't remember doing that last time on my other sample, but I'll leave that there. Probably doesn't look that bad unless you compare it to the other one. But let's move on. I'll go up here and I'll do this little shape here. So I'll just go right over top of this bottle. I'll zoom in and I'll just use my pen tool, and I'll start above here and I'll click. And I'll click and I'll click and drag a little to get a little roundish kind of bottom there, and I'll click and I'll click up here, maybe click and drag just a slight bit and click there. And if I go anywhere else, I'll hit escape, but I'll hit done. And actually I might, well, let's see how this looks. I'm gonna grab this and bring it over here. Now it needs to go in front of the bottle shoulder, so I'll bring it up here, and let me call this bottom cone, this thing, and I'll put it here right in front of the bottle shape. And vector 2, I'll double click on it. I'll put neck highlight, and I'll give it a white color first. Or what I'll do is I'll just go to fill and take the eyedropper and just kind of pick up that color. And let me move over so I can see it. And I don't need a stroke. And this could be a little more rounded here. I might want to double click in here. I might want to take my bend tool and kind of bend this in ever so slightly. If I could mess with the anchor points a little bit, but let's see how that looks. Actually, it might actually look better with the point out a little. Let me drag this out a little. And you might say, why? Because you can see there's kind of a gradient here. It's kind of going from there to kind of transparent. So let me see if I could do that a little bit. I'm going to go to linear, and it's going up and down right now. So let me go to this kind of gray on the side here and kind of semi-transparent that way. And that actually might be what I want. Actually, it's almost perfect because it is kind of transparent there, and that's kind of what I want, because this end is already transparent. That's pretty good. So if I want to lighten this, I could go here and maybe, I don't want it white, but I might want to kind of go down a little bit. That probably looks okay. So something like that for a highlight. Now, is there a line on there? I can't tell if there's a line on there. Looks like there's an edge, but I might have to hit done. And that's not too bad. I could tweak that a little bit more. I could tweak the gradient a little bit more if I need to. Bring it in, or maybe do it in that direction a little bit so I'm not seeing the line. And that's okay for now. Kind of getting that. Maybe you could stretch this out. Do something like that. Stretch it up. We'll have the foil over top of it. So I think that looks okay. So I'm going to try and do the highlight over here. So I'll just trace over this. So I'll zoom in here, and I'll just use my pen tool and just go here and then kind of round it off. And then click on the point, and then just go down here to the bottom. I'll click, I'll click, I'll click, and I'll click and drag, and I'll hit done. So there's my shape, and let me call it bottle highlight, and I'll move it over somewhere in here, and I'll fill it. So I'll take away the stroke, I'll hit fill, and might be using the same fill as before. Let's see what this is. Let me try the gradient linear. And I'll just kind of flip this around. I guess I'll just flip this. I don't know if they have a directional thing where I could just put in a percentage, but I'll rotate this around a little. Well, actually, you know what? Let me leave it like this, because it does fade off in the bottom. I'll let it fade off a little down there, and that's okay up here. Now it does fade off a little up at the top, so I might move this over, and I might drag this, option drag or alt drag, and put that up there so it fades off a little bit at the top. And I could bring this over so it's closer to it. Let me click off of here and see what this looks like. Or I'll click the X. And that might be a little, not enough, because it's not going up far enough. And let me drag this up higher so we see a little more, but not all the way. Something like that. So it's not going to a point. And I think that looks okay. And then I'll maybe blur it slightly. I'll just kind of click on the, I'll close this out. I think I might have put another color there, but that's okay. And you could also adjust the transparency a little, but I might just blur it a little. You could go on here, kind of make it a little transparent. That might work rather than doing a blur. Or you could do a little both. I could maybe take this down around 90 and then go to effects and add an effect. And use the drop down, use layer blur, and I'll go into the settings, maybe like 3, something like that. And that looks okay. Not as bright as that. I'll have to work on it a little bit. Might need to be a little brighter, and it might need like a white down here now that I look at it. when I look at the gradient. I might go back to the gradient, and I might click on here, right here, and click on that color and make that a little brighter. And then I might bring this up just a little bit, just to shorten that a little bit. And this color might even be a little more whiter. Get a little more white in there. Just like this one, I might get a little more white in there, since I did turn everything down. And that looks a little better. It looks a little realistic. I could probably even it off, but even that little brightness should probably be on the shoulder a little bit more, but that ain't bad. And I'll do this other side, so I'll zoom in and I'll just trace this one. And I'll just go over here and just kind of click and round it off. And then click on that. And then just go down to the bottom. Kind of click down here. I'll click back up. It's not that hard to trace. Actually, working in Figma, this tracing works pretty nice, I think. And I'll go here. And I'll kind of go in there to kind of finish that off a little bit. And I'll hit done. And to fill, I'll keep it in that fill right now, and I'll just bring it over. And I might just try turning down the opacity, whatever it is. Turning down the opacity. Now it does have a kind of a, maybe a gradient over there. You could kind of work on a gradient and have it go kind of sideways if you want, or you could try blur and see what that looks like. So I'm going to go down here to layer blur again, and I'll go to the settings, and maybe I'll try 3 again. And I think that looks okay. I don't know if I'd need to mess with a gradient too much. I think when you zoom back, it looks like a bottle, and it looks pretty realistic and doesn't look too bad. I think even this one, if I add a blur to it, again, maybe 2, I think that's probably fine. I think that looks okay, although it's a little darker right next to it. But what we'll do next is we'll do the foil. So let's do the foil after doing those highlights. I don't think that looks bad at all. I think that looks pretty good. I'm not crazy about that thing down there. But like I said, I don't even remember doing that last time. I don't know if the red one even had that. But let's work on the foil. Now, how are we going to do the foil? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to do an intersect and just get this whole shape. So I'm going to copy the bottle again. So I'm going to take the bottle shape, wherever the bottle shape is, and just copy it. And see if I could drag it. Make sure I don't grab on anything else. I'm going to hold Option and try to just copy the bottle shape. And you could put it over here. Now, if your background is black and you can't really see, you could go here and change this. And you could kind of work on your desktop a little. So I'll change that so it's a little lighter. That way you could use this area here. And I'm just going to draw a rectangle over here about the same distance down as that, and I'll turn down the opacity so I can see what I'm doing here. And I'll move this kind of right next to it, and then I'll grab this and put this over top of it. Now you could move it over here and do everything over here. You could select this, hold Shift, move everything over here if you want. That's fine too. Let me make sure this is on top of it. Actually, this is not in there, so let me put rectangle on top of bottle shape. For some reason, this came outside of letter, maybe because I moved off of here. But still, what I'll do is I'll highlight both of these, the rectangle, and I'll hold Shift, and I'll get the bottle shape, and I'll do a intersect, and I'm left with that shape. And that's all I want. And I could even flatten it, so it's permanent. So I'll put that here, and I'll just put it right over top. And now I'll zoom in, and I'll start to work on the gradient to match this. Now, it's called intersect right now. I'm not sure why that's showing up on top of that. Oh, because I have the opacity down. That's why I'm seeing through it a little bit. That's okay. Let's put it up solid. Let's go here take an eyedropper and just pick a color, something like that. And now it's solid. And now let's make it a linear gradient. And I'll move over here so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to kind of change it. I'll grab the end here and kind of flip this sideways. So it's going right across like that. So it's going left to right. And now what I'm going to do, and even if you need to hide this, you might even want to do this. I mean, depending how much room you have here, I'm going to go here and go to View, Panels, Show Left Sidebar. Maybe I'll move that a little so I could kind of move out here. Then I could just focus on this because I'm looking at the gradient area kind of aside of that. So it's taking up a lot of room. So I'm going to move this back to where it was. And I'm going to take my eyedropper again for that and click on that. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of click right here and take my eyedropper and click on that. And then I'm going to kind of go in this middle area right about here. Now you could move this underneath, whatever you need to do, but I'm just going to kind of do it by eye right now. So I'm going to go next and go right here and click on that. Take the eyedropper, kind of figure out where that is. Then at the end here, it gets very dark. So I want that solid. And I want the very dark color there. And then as I move in, I'll click on here and get that kind of lighter color. And then it gets very dark again. So I'm going to click right next to it. And you could zoom in to see things a little bit better. And I'll take my eyedropper and get on kind of the darker part. Now you could move these around then to help it out a little bit more. You could even go here and give this kind of that same color as that one. That way it's a little kind of lighter, and if you move that close to that, you should get more of a line when you get close to there. This one should probably be a little darker. I'll make that darker on the end. That looks about right. And let me zoom in a little bit. Now I have a little bit of a harsh line here. So I might go kind of in between here. I might have to add one right here. It's hard to see on here. And here I might go on here again. Kind of choose that color. So I'm kind of getting there. I might want to put another one here to get a wider, lighter area. So on this one here, I'm going to go on that area as well. So now I have that lighter area there. This one might be a little darker. Something like that. Now it's starting to look like foil. It's starting to show up a little bit better. And you can see it's getting tough here because I'm getting a lot of gradients in there. And here I'm going to kind of make that one darker. Slide it. I can't get too close to it because it's starting to overlap with the other one. I'm going to pull one out of here. This one I'm going to delete. I think I could just hit delete and then move this over a little bit. And I think that's looking okay. I think that's kind of what I want. And I think what you can do is save this as a style, but there's a place where you could save it as a style. I'm not seeing it here, but let me close out of this and click on this again. Let me see what, oh, this has style. So if I'm on this, let's see if I can make this a style. And I'll add a new style. Create style. And I'll just call it foil gradient. And hopefully you're following this because this is the first time I've done it in Figma. But then I could take this thing, if you had saved this thing, and put it on top. Now, let me bring my other thing back. Panels, show left sidebar. And just see where I'm at here. This thing was called top ridge. What is this thing called? That should be called intersect. That should be called foil. And this, wherever the other foil thing, what is this called? Top, I should call it top foil ridge. Foil. and that should go over top of foil. Now let's see what vector 1 is. Oh, that's right bottle highlight, and this is called bottle highlight. I should probably call it left. And this thing, here I have the style. Can I drag this on here? I'm not sure how to get the style on here. Like I said, I've worked with styles one time. Let's see. Fill. They have an option to use a style. Oh, there it is. There. Okay, that wasn't that hard. Let me undo that. Just if you can see what I did. I clicked on here, and I clicked on this thing, which is styles, and that opened up styles. And then it showed styles down here. I guess you could search for them, but the only one here is foil, so I just put it in foil. And then I'll get rid of the stroke. Hit minus on the stroke, and I'll put this over top. Now, it's exactly the same right now. So what would I do to make it a little bit different? It's kind of offset to the right. And what you actually have to do is break it so it's different from the style now. That way you can edit it. So now I could just go into the linear. Now let me undo that just so you know what I did. I went in here and I broke it. So it's not part of the style anymore. Otherwise they're kind of linked together. So this has that same style, but now I'm going to break it, and now it's just a linear fill. And I could go in here and maybe, I don't know, stretch it out or move it in one direction or the other. I'm not sure what's going to work here until I put it on top. Like I said, I haven't done this in Figma yet, so it's going to be over a little. So maybe something like that. Now I could put a little border. Actually, that looks fine. Actually, I just moved it over a little, and I could put a little stroke on it. Let's see if I could put a stroke on it, and just a little one, and I'll put it on the outside, and I'll give it maybe a dark green color. Maybe I'll make it 2-point, and I don't know if I could blur a stroke. Maybe I can. Maybe I can add an effect and blur the stroke. Now, it's blurring everything. So let me see here. I don't think I can, but if I put it on 1, kind of blur the stroke. It's okay. How about 2? And what if I put this on the inside? That's not too bad. And what if I put the color a little darker? That might be okay. Actually, that's not bad at all. I'm actually surprised that came out that well. So that looks pretty good. There's a little area in here where it could be a little darker, this gradient thing. You could make another shape and work on it, but you know, I think it looks fine. I'm not worried about getting it as close to the other bottle as I am about making it look like a realistic bottle. And I think, you know, if you put these side by side, I don't know if anybody would really, which one was vector and which one wasn't. So this thing looks okay. So I think what I'll do is I'll stop the video here and kind of end it, because I think things look okay. I mean, I could fix some things and work on some things, but that looks pretty good for my first shot at doing this in Figma. So that's the end of part 2. So if you get to this point, you're good. We can actually save this. If we need to work on it in Illustrator, we can actually save this as an SVG and bring it in Illustrator, or we can continue to work on it in Figma. And it hasn't been bad working on it in Figma either. So we're learning some things about gradients, and you know, then when you go back to Illustrator, you kind of compare and contrast a little bit what works better. And you know, you're still building up your skills either way. Once you work on one program or the other, you know, you're working on vector artwork, you're working on gradients. It's kind of similar in all kinds of programs, but you're certainly building up your skills. The fact that you can create this in Figma, you could certainly translate that in Illustrator, even if you didn't do the whole thing in Illustrator, but you know, we'll look at both when we do it. So that's the end of part 2.